What's up, Pod Pals? It is your buddy Adam, and you are listening to Podcasting Business School. This is the show where I teach podcasters how to love their show like a hobby, but build it like a business. This is a podcast audit session. So, if you are searching for podcasting tips on podcast growth, podcast monetization, podcast audience engagement, how to level up as a podcaster, you're in the right place. I've got my new pal, Neha, from the Globe in Her Backpack podcast today. We're going to audit her show, and I'm going to give her everything that I've got. Neha, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
All right. So if we could start off by having you describe like what your show's about and then who the ideal listener is, I think that'll help me get a few more ideas dialed in.
Okay. So, Globe in Her Backpack, I call it as an inspirational travel podcast because it is not just limited to travel. I'm not just providing information about a particular place in India. I'm also telling out stories. It's basically about the experience. So, whichever place I have been, I provide a bit of guide to that place. And I do so because most of the places that I talk about in the podcast are offbeat destinations. So, I give a guide to those places in entertaining story form. And I conclude with whatever I have learned out of that entire trip of mine because I believe that travel is not just about visiting a particular place, it is about the experience and what you learn out of it and what you become out of that one trip. So yeah, because I'm quite passionate towards travel, so
Yeah,
just
it sounds like it. It sounds like it. So who could you describe your ideal listener, like what they look like?
so
What are they looking to achieve?
so basically my ideal listener, if I have to talk about that specific demographics, the age group would be 24 to 35 max, nobody beyond that. And it, they are mostly people who listen to other travel podcasts, and I think they can be those people as well who are listening to say other categories in podcast, like you have got travel category, similarly you've got inspirational motivational speakers,
Right.
that category. So I'm considering these two category listeners would be my listeners as well. Yeah, these.
Okay.
And majorly out of the stats that I've got more of female listeners to my podcast. I don't know the specific reason for that, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. You're a female podcaster. That a lot of females will start off with female voices when they're listening and things like that. So that definitely makes sense. Okay, so the first area that I want to kind of fine tune is with your search engine optimization. You had mentioned in when I had you fill out some information, you said your largest obstacle is bad algorithm on Spotify and Apple. Is that sort of like searchability? Is that what you're talking about there?
Yes, so even say on Apple it is still fine, but I've got a bad listing on Spotify. Like it's not there. Even when I had like, I thought that it's because of my consistency issue, but then even when I had like episodes in a decent less gap, still my podcast was not there. Even if I'm like searching in travel category, or it was not there. There were other category people, entertainment category people who were popping up high. Mine was not there at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we might want to look at adding some keywords to your podcast description and definitely your episode titles. The term travel tips is very SEO and searchable friendly. It's kind of like in the real estate industry. If you had a real estate podcast, I would want you to have episodes titled "Moving to" and then the town. So travel tips for or traveling to, and then having that the location that you're going to in the episode or the location you're talking about. So traveling advice, traveling tips, traveling to locations. I think that's going to be great for episode titles. But
Hmm.
also in the show description, make sure you use some of that terminology. Like you describe your ideal listener, what they just like what you just did for me. But then once you get past that, I want you to drop in a few how-to questions, or just we want to keyword stuff a little bit that makes sense. So what I do is kind of like what I did at the beginning of the show. If you're looking for podcasting tips for how to launch a podcast, how to grow a podcast, anything that you think your listener, a question they would type into Google to find out information about what your episode's about, you want to put that in your show description, in your episode description, and your episode title. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do follow that to an extent, but maybe I'm messing up with the keywords because whichever specific area I'm talking about. So the hosting that I'm using, it has got additional option to put in some certain hashtags or
Yep.
any keywords that I have. So I try to put in those, but I don't know whether that's really helping me or not.
Yeah. Where do you host at?
Buzzsprout.
Okay. So yeah, that little keyword category, that's helpful, but the even more helpful place will be in the episode description and in your
Description, yeah.
podcast listing description to have traveling tips. If you have episodes that are about like traveling around India or something like that frequently, like I would have something about that in there. Just anything that you think somebody would search into Google of, if they were looking for a show like yours, if they were looking for answers that you provide, I would put that in there for sure. And that'll be super helpful. So that should help a little bit with the searchability and the algorithm. So when it comes to audience growth, podcast monetization, audience engagement, those are like the three core areas that I've got some notes on here and some ideas. What would be most helpful for you to as a starting point for where we kind of start the conversation on tips here today?
What?
So would you want to start with audience growth, audience monetization, or audience engagement?
I think engagement, then growth, then monetization.
Okay. So engagement first. One of the things that you have like with your show, like people who are really into travel, they connect well with each other. That's like a tribe mentality. Like they love talking to other people that are in the travel and learning experiences. And they go, oh, that's somewhere that I've always wanted to go. What was your experience like? So I think having some sort of like a monthly networking event, I call it a community engagement lead magnet, like I do with my Pod Pal Zoom party. I do them a couple times a month, but you could have specific ones, specific online meetups for locations or, regions, countries, continents, or just in general. Like you show up once per month. It's our travel tip party. And I would record it, put it out as an episode of your show, because then everybody gets to talk. They get to talk about maybe for 3 minutes about their experience of where they went, what their top tip is for traveling to that location, and then something else. And, 3 or 4 minutes. And I think that'll pull your audience out of the audience zone into the let's connect and create content together zone. And this, like with your style of audience with travel, I think it would go over really, really well. It's sharing, it's networking, and that'll kind of level you up. And then you actually get to engage with these people, and then they'll hear their episode come out and like, wow, I was on this show that I listen to every week or whatever. So that kind of levels them up to super fan status, and they'll refer you and recommend you because people they travel in herds. Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
And they have friends that they travel with. So they'll be like, oh, you need to listen to Niha's podcast because I was on there and we talked about this and this and this. So they'll start recommending you. So if you do that once a month and you've got 5 or 10 or 15 of your listeners on there, that's like a little army that you're sending out into the world that's going to be recommending you. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay.
That's a good suggestion.
All right. So like the format with that, obviously you want to make sure that everybody gets to talk. So you want to, like some people are like, I'm going to do this for half an hour, but I'm only going to have 4 or 5 people, because the shorter the time frame, the less time you have for everybody to say something. So that's going to be important. And that's also kind of the irresistible reason to attend. Maybe you do a giveaway that like makes people want to be there live. Maybe there's, or they get a shout out on the show, or maybe like some people have like stickers and t-shirts or whatever, things like that. Or there's like a travel book that you recommend that you would send to them. something like that. Another reason why they want to get there. And
Hmm.
yeah, I think you'll create this little community. So you want some sort of an attraction device to make them want to show up, like a giveaway. Make sure everybody gets to talk. That's the second component. And then I want you to have a little bit of time at least to position yourself as an expert. So like you can give, 2 or 3 travel tips every time, but I want you kind of presenting yourself as an expert on what you're talking about, because that helps level you up as far as positioning when it comes to monetization and things like that. So does that make sense so far?
Totally, totally does.
Okay. Any questions about any of that, or any like, ooh, I don't know if I'll be able to pull this off? Any hesitations with that?
Yeah, so there is one question which is not related to this topic, but it was there like earlier. Uh, so the question is that is it important to have, say, a particular hosting, or because that also impacts how much? Because I've shifted from one hosting to other, and I did feel the difference somewhere. So does hosting really play an important part in a good ranking of your show? Does that happen?
It it will A good host will allow you to show up more easily in more places. Buzzsprout isn't bad. I don't have any complaints about Buzzsprout. I use Libsyn. I know a lot of people are switching to Captivate. They really like Captivate. But the only one I kind of don't recommend is Anchor. It doesn't have real great distribution. A lot of people start on it, but it's a little
Yeah, I
buggy. And
started on that, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So you can probably tell the difference just going from Anchor to Buzzsprout, and you're like,
yeah.
wow, it's a little more professional. It's a little more organized. You're able to like schedule things in advance, and it's nice. So yeah, I mean, you should now. Can you have you like you can't find your show at all on Spotify, or like if you dig enough, can you actually find it, or it's just not ranking like you
Sorry,
would like it to?
sorry, you got freezed. What was your question?
So on Spotify, are you able to find your show at all, or is it non-existent on Spotify?
If I'm typing my name, of course I can find it.
Okay.
Uh, but if I'm, say, looking for travel, even if I'm going on, say, the 200th rank or something, I'm still not able to find.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't worry about that a whole lot. Like, I've got a business show and I've got 200 episodes, and I'm full-time podcaster, and I won't rank in the top 200 in Spotify. So, like travel, that's a larger category.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't stress out about ranking. Now, something like a lot of people get obsessed with Chartable. Like you can go on
Yeah,
chartable.com,
and yeah.
and you can see where you're ranking in different countries and things like that. Again, I don't put a whole lot of weight into that, because you could rank in like an obscure like Eastern European country like Kazakhstan or something, but it's based off of how many people have signed up for Chartable. Like if I'm not signed up in Chartable, I can't rank in Chartable. So that's something else to keep in mind. So I mean, it's cool to see. I would be more interested in you watching, instead of watching the rankings, look at your month over month or like your year over year comparison of your download growth numbers. So like compare August of 2021 to August of 2022 when we get there and go, all right, where am I at? Because even throughout the year, you'll see peaks and valleys of when people are listening to shows. So I would look at that and shoot for things like the first benchmark I tell everybody to shoot for is if you release an episode today, 30 days from today, the first goal is to have that hit 125 downloads for that one episode. That'll put you in the top 50% of all podcasts that exist. So that's kind of the first benchmark that we shoot for. And we start to, market effectively to build towards that. Does that make sense?
Totally, totally.
Okay. So let's
And
talk. Go ahead.
there was one more question related to the topic that we were talking. So in that, when I'm talking about engagement, okay, will it be good to have a interview as well? Like you're talking about getting up people who listeners on the show, but what if I try getting some, say, travel experts on the show? Do you think that would also help
Yeah.
somewhere?
Yes. So There are 4 different styles of episodes that I like. All right. Obviously, you've been doing solo episodes, which I like. I think that's important. That positions you as an expert. I think that's very important. There are interview episodes. I think you can definitely take advantage of those, having people that are travel experts that have maybe traveled to areas that you don't have as much expertise on. That way your audience is like, wow, I can get it all here on Niha's show because she brings other people in to fill in where she doesn't have the expertise. And that's pretty cool. The other cool thing about that is if they have travel podcasts, a lot of times you invite them on your show first. We're all content creators. If there's a good conversation that happens, they'll go, hey, you should come on my show also. And that exposes you to their travel podcast listener audience. And then you'll scoop up a percentage of those people into your world. So it's very effective with doing that. And the more you do it, the better you become at that. So those are the first 2. Then the third is the community style episode, which we described earlier, where you would invite listeners to come on. And then the 4th style is a coaching style episode. That would be more of a one-on-one. Maybe you have a focused topic, like traveling to Italy or traveling to northern India or whatever. And you want to have somebody that's, you'll put like a call to action in an earlier episode and go, I'm going to do an episode on traveling to northern India. And I would like somebody that's a listener to come on and go one-on-one. And if we're going to plan out your trip together. And so that would be like what I call a coaching style episode. And you're one-on-one for 15 to 30 minutes. And again, you're just adding expertise. And this is what leads to the path of monetization, where people will start hiring you for those types of services. Like I'm making a trip. I need Niha's course. I need her coaching services. I need her consulting services to help me maximize my experience when I go on these off the beaten path, locations that she has experience with. So that kind of knocks out the monetization aspect as well. So I think you could use a mixture of all 4. Like you've already got the solo, adding in some interviews every once in a while. That's very easily done. I can introduce you to 2. I've got 2 friends that have travel podcasts right now that I can make an introduction to, and they'll gladly come on your show and talk. So just let me know. Give me the thumbs up, and I'm good on that. And
definitely, I'm up for it.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll make that happen. And then the other 2, the coaching and the community. Sometimes people are a little nervous about that, but once you start doing them, you'll be upset that you weren't doing them right from the very start. They're very easy. It's like what we're doing right here. I put a call to action out of my show or on Clubhouse or wherever you heard it. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. And now we're here and we're interacting, and you can, so this experience that we're having, you could provide that for your audience as well. And it's pretty cool. And it's great content. And these, I used to try to sneak these episodes into my Tuesday routine. And then all of a sudden, these are my most popular episodes. So I gave them their own day. I'm like, I need a whole second episode per week. Every Friday is just podcast audits now, because everybody loves them. They love, because you have the questions that my ideal listeners have. So when you do this and you pull somebody out of your listenership and you have a specific traveling to episode and you're coaching them on what you would recommend, they're asking the same questions that most of your listeners would want to ask you. And so they're tuning in and they're really listening, like, oh, this is going to be really good. And again, the SEO is going to be really good on these episodes because it's dialed into a specific traveling to location or traveling tips for that location. So the next step is figuring out how you kind of massage all of those in with a weekly show. And that's kind of, that you have to kind of map that out a little bit. And, but I think you could have success with all 4. I would try it, see what your audience responds to, and you never know. So any questions about the different episode styles?
No, totally true with it.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. Now with monetization, we touched on that a little bit. What ideas do you have as far as, obviously sponsorships are always, that's an opportunity. If we grow our show big enough, there's possibilities there, especially with like a travel brand. I could see travel based, commercial brands wanting to get involved with you. And again, the 2 women that I'm going to introduce you to that are in the travel podcast industry, that's something that I would ask them. Like, are you getting any offers to brand partner with companies? What are you doing? And they'll have better tips for you on that than I will.
Yeah.
But monetization wise, what ideas have you had, or what kind of monetization goals do you have for your show right now?
Frankly, this was just as a side hustle that I thought of. So I do not have any specific idea about how to exactly monetize it. All I came across was Podcon, that I can select whatever offers are there on Podcon and then accordingly pitch. And if things go well, I get probably paid for that. That
Yeah.
was in my mind. And secondly, what I thought was that if my number of downloads increased to say a certain number per episode, then I would probably pitch into some homestays or some hotels, and then probably say that just like how a vlogger does on YouTube, something similar to that. That probably
Okay.
I would just talk some time about that particular hotel in my show, and then accordingly, yeah,
Yes. So affiliate partnerships, like that
affiliate.
is
Yeah.
something. So let's marry that to some of the ideas we've had with episode styles. If you have like a hotel chain that you really like, that serves an area that you love to travel to in one of these locations that you're going to talk about, you mention that, then you get a code from that hotel that you partner with and be like, code Niha or whatever, and make sure your audience is using that, and make sure if you're like consulting with somebody, they're using that as well. And you could do very well monetization wise. And that's passive. That's just a recommendation. They do all the fulfillment. So it's not like creating an online course, and then if something's messed up, you have to fix it and you have to deal with people that are frustrated and things like that. You're just setting up, connections. So you could have, maybe there's even like, is Airbnb, do people do like, vacation rentals and things like that where you travel to? So, okay. So you could have recommended resources for that. And you could have recommended resources for travel. Even like traveling apparel, depending on the climate and things like that, food, restaurants, things like that. You could be partnering. You could do a whole, if you have a very specific location, you're like, here are my top 3 restaurants that I love eating at in this location. Here's where I stay. Here is where I shop for groceries. And I would just try to brand partner with as many of those people as possible, getting a little code so that they know when people show up or whatever, they came from you, or they pay you up front for the mention being in your show. And people will do that, so those are some ideas with that. I also I think you could do really well with travel consulting. Like that's something that people pay for. And with you, I think I like your niche of a little bit off the beaten path, not traditional hotspot travel. And so that makes you that's an easier path to you being an expert. You know what I'm saying? And like, oh, I really
Yeah.
know this well. I've stayed there. Here's where I like to go. Here are the best beaches. Here's the place the best restaurant to shop at. You have to, this experience is amazing. You have to do this or that. Consulting on trips and things like that, or having little packages put together to help people get set up for success. I think that's something you could definitely charge for. And honestly, if you wanted to, you could even go broader brush and go, all right, every quarter, I'm going to do a workshop on the best way to map out an off the beaten path location to anywhere. And it's like you have your checklist that you go through on what supplies we need, what we need to think about in advance, traveler's insurance, packing, how to scout out locations, all that. Like you do this, I'm sure you have a process and you can monetize that process. And it doesn't have to be about a specific location. It could just be something that you talk about. Our quarterly workshops coming up, you mentioned it on the show. And then once per quarter, there's a day or an afternoon or a weekend where you do a virtual event and you take people through it, and you charge them, $200, $500, $1,000, whatever you think the value is. And then they show up, they pay you, and they get all the resources, and you walk them through it live, which helps them take their location and put it through those checklists and check boxes. Does that make sense?
Totally. Totally.
I think you'd have fun. Like that sounds like I saw a little glimmer in your eye. Like, ooh, that sounds fun. So yeah, monetization wise, I think those would be, with affiliates, with a little bit of consulting, and then some sort of a group workshop that's more not location specific, but just traveling based in general with your specific processes. I think you could do well with it. So that's sounding good so far.
Yeah, good. All good.
Outstanding. All right. Well, we're running up on our time here. I want to make sure that you get to shout out your show, website, anything that you want to put out there to my audience. So go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so as you already heard, the name is Globe in Her Backpack, and I kind of specialize in untamed places, untamed offbeat places, and also I have a blog page in the same name, that is www.globeinherbackpack.com. So if you're looking for any offbeat destination, mostly in India, or if you're looking for a property that has got a unique theme, which is not like a regular stay, then I think my blog page will be best for you. Also, the podcast, I ensure that you will have a really good story about that place. So I'll be providing information about a particular place in entertaining story form, and it will be good.
Outstanding.
In case if you love
Untamed.
traveling, yeah.
I love that word. Like that's something you should definitely use. That perked my ears. Ooh, untamed locations. I like that. I like that. So
Yeah.
everybody go and check out what Neha has to offer. I appreciate you joining us here for your podcast audit today, all the way from India. So that's very, very exciting. For everybody out there listening in, if you would like to do a podcast audit just like my pod pal Neha has done here today, all you have to do is go to the main website, www.podcastingbusiness.school. And with that, I will send you all out into the world wishing you health, happiness, and many downloads. We'll see you on the next episode.